Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So the way I've done this show is I take stock requests during the week, I put them together, and then that makes up the bulk of the show. I'll go through them in looking at trend and momentum in multiple time frames and give my kind of feel. This is something that I've done for institutional money managers for over 30 years. They'll call me up and ask about individual stocks, and I'll go through and give them what I'm thinking. So that's basically what I want to do when I go through the stock requests that come through. At the beginning of each show, I spend between 5 and 10 minutes going through a lesson on technical analysis. And what I want to talk about today is key buy and sell zones. That would be areas where I want to think like a professional. Where do I want to think like I want to be a buyer? Where do I want to think and be like a seller? In other words, where are the high quality buy and sell zones? So if we get into the agenda, I want to focus on both. I want to say, when we get into a buy zone, what do I want to do? How do I go about finding an entry? And then when I get into what I would consider to be a sell zone, how would I think about being a seller? So I'm going to go into that, and then I'm going to go through the symbol requests that came through. Let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, so I've got a weekly chart of the QQQ up. This obviously can be done in any time frame, but what I want you to think about is when we have an 18 and a 40 moving up at about the same rate, and price is trending to the upside with these lines, all right? And we have ADX confirmation. I mean, MACD sometimes will have an irregular uptrend where it'll be showing divergences, but it's really not. It's really just the fact that the first move out of the gates was so strong that you were never going to get another measurement like that as time went on. So this turns into, I think, a little bit less helpful because it looks like it's throwing off a bunch of divergences. But ADX doesn't typically do that. And the reason why is that I look at this 25 line, as long as every new peak is making a peak above 25, and this clearly was strong through here, and then we went through a consolidation and then went to another new high. We made a minor peak above 25 here, and then here we did not have confirmation at 25. So it wouldn't necessarily be looking after this new high and pullback, but every other one of these, I want to look into this zone, the zone between the 18 and the 40. All right, that's where if both lines are rising, the 18 sometimes it acts as a springboard and it acts right at the point it gets to it, it starts to bounce off of it. But in a lot of cases, you're going to get overrun of the 18, and it's going to come in between the two lines. And if you have support from the 40 underneath, it gives you a much more conviction. That's why I like it better having those two lines together, especially when the 40, they're going up at about the same rate. The same thing holds true to the downside. Once these lines are declining, you're in a defined downtrend, and you can sell rallies into this line as long as the momentum condition in place is telling you to do that. So how would you go about doing this? All right. So, I mean, it's good to look at it in hindsight and say, okay, there were all of these opportunities, but where do you buy? Do you just start diving in the moment this pulls inside the zone? And I don't do that. What I like to do is look at it like this. So I've actually got on the left now, I've got an older chart of the monthly chart of the QQQs. It's a little faded. I did this for a webinar years ago, and I wanted to just show where there's buy zones underneath and there's sell zones above. When you're getting extended away from the 18 to the upside, that's a sell zone. Now, how do you handle that? There's two different ways. Let's start with the buy side. On the buy side, as you're pulling into and in between the two moving averages and you're coming down towards that line, it's not an automatic set buy. You go down to the next time frame and you're going to see the 18 rolling down. You're going to see a pattern of lower highs and lower lows setting up. And what we're looking for is where we come into this zone and then we start to show a sign that things are turning around, where this 18 is actually flipping back to the upside. More important than that is we want to see a 1, 2, 3 change in trend, which you can see based on this. This is a 1, 2 here, and 3 is here, and I've shown you the graphic form of that right here. So if you wait for that and you know that you've got somewhat parallel lines on the higher time frame, you've got a phenomenal entry where you're getting back in line with the bigger time frame, somewhere in the zone. Now, I love the 2. So if we get a break of the trend line and we come back in here and we're in the zone still, but we know that things are starting to shift back to the upside, this is a great way to look for entries. On the sell side, as we get extended away, it's not an automatic sell. I mean, if you did that, you'd probably be selling all the way, almost every single bar the moment it gets extended. So what I like to do is go and either look for a 1, 2, 3 reversal, which is, there's no problem with that. And you might even do that on a daily chart. So if this is happening on a monthly, you'd go to the weekly and look for divergence and say that the momentum does not confirm, right? And then go for your 1, 2, 3 reversal on the daily chart. So that's how I would use 3 time frames that way. You can do the same thing in this format too, but you don't really need it on the buy side because, well, you could. The way you would do it is you'd look for divergence here or look for divergence here, and then go try and find a 1, 2, 3 on the daily chart. You see what I mean? So if we come into the zone and we have divergence on the weekly chart, you can go down and look for a 1, 2, 3 on the daily and get in a little earlier. So you'd be getting in here at closer to the bottom if there's divergence. If there's no divergence, then you wait for that next bottom to be formed and a little bit more confirmation, and then go and look for your 1, 2, 3 reversal. So I think these are really quality ways to help you understand where to. We're looking for high quality entry points and essentially saying, if I'm in this zone, I'm looking to be a buyer. And if I'm in this zone, I know I'm looking to be a buyer because I have momentum confirmation, right? If I'm stretched away from the 18, I'm looking to be a seller. This is really smart trading, right? This is how you can play a little bit more as a professional, where you're kind of taking advantage of where it's in a retail level, and then you're taking advantage of it when it's at a wholesale level. So we want to keep thinking wholesale and retail. Where is a retail entry? Retail entries here. We want to be thinking be a seller here, right? Where's a professional entry or a wholesale entry? That's down in here, down in here, down in here. And then if we start to lose momentum, we don't necessarily want to keep doing those type of pullbacks and looking at that. And if the trend reverses, then we want to start taking advantage of things the other way. All right. Hopefully this helps. Let's go ahead and get into the individual stocks. So if you're enjoying the show, hit that like button and also subscribe so you can get future content. Just briefly, my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I am currently offering my book at a discount in a PDF format. So if you have an interest in learning about trend, momentum, MACD, ADX in multiple time frames, go to rabilstockresearch.com/book. Okay, let's start out with the Dow Jones Industrial Average. One of the things I want you guys to think about when you pull up a chart like this, especially when there's multiple charts coming up, is what is the market telling? What is that picture telling you? What jumps off the page? What's the first thing? And as I've mentioned to my subscribers, the first thing I look at is price. And I would tell you that the thing that really hits me here is what's taking place with the weekly and the monthly. So let's just zoom in on the monthly real quick. Do you see how tight of a pattern this was for what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 months, basically just sideways tight action. Okay. And it's doing it while it's walking along the 18, which was declining and it was starting to flatten out. And then you have this 40 coming up underneath as well. So that kind of hits me there. That when I see that, I'm thinking, well, this is prepping for a move, and it does look like it's to the upside because it's almost like walking along that moving average. And then if you go and look at the weekly, look at how it got really, really tight here for about 4 or 5 weeks. Okay, now it's interesting because I had drawn in for the subscribers. I was basically looking at this break of this trend line as being pretty important because we had a low ADX condition in place. We were starting to see some signs of buyers stepping in, and I just kind of felt like that would ignite maybe the start of a move. But it took a little bit of a while to get going, and it went sideways. And then the breakout above this resistance zone was really the key. Now, the other thing that does, I think, jump out when I look at this is this ADX pattern, because it had been low for a couple months. Now, normally a couple months doesn't seem like that big a deal unless it's on a daily chart. Daily charts don't tend to have low ADX for extended periods. Now, I know we do get that sometimes, and maybe it happens a little bit more time in the indexes, but not necessarily in individual stocks. So if I see a daily chart, and preferably where all three lines are below the 25 line, then I know it's probably prepping for something strong. So be on the lookout for that when it takes place. But it's still pretty bullish. This sideways pattern, sideways line on the daily chart with low ADX, and we get the breakout with a really convincing bar. You see this huge bar? That was a really strong bar. So I think what we're seeing is continuation from this tight pattern. We had a very, very tight pattern on the monthly and a tight pattern on the weekly. The bias was to the upside because price was essentially above almost all the moving averages, and then we kick into gear with a move back up through these this short-term resistance. So I think we're getting probably a little bit late in the short term. I would expect some kind of a pullback here pretty soon, but I would lean on the hourly. And if we talk about zones, buy zones, you see how these lines have been pretty strong, continue to show sort of a parallel nature to them. So each of these pullbacks, they're almost showing up on all the time frames. This is almost showing up as the best trend to play little minor pullbacks. But what I'm looking for is for this ADX to die out. And if that ADX does die out as this is trying to climb, then that's probably a sign that we are going to finally go through a little bit deeper pullback. Okay, let's look at the KRE, because I did want to spend a few minutes on the regional banks. So look at what took place on the monthly. I mean, these were some of the worst performing stocks this year. They got pounded. Look at the volume exit, but they came into a big support area. And I do so much work with institutional investors that are trying to buy when stuff is down and take, looking at value. I have value clients, right? So they're trying to buy when stuff is down, and we're highly focused on this area here. And it's not necessarily something that I would recommend as a trade necessarily, unless you can find a pattern set up on the smaller time frames. We had a little bit of a divergence set up, a little bit of a pinch play on the weekly to start July. But the main point I wanted to make here is that I think there is still some room. I mean, if you look at this, I think if you go through and you look at what this has done, how far it broke down and how far it's bouncing after pretty climatic activity, would not be surprised to see this working its way back down to that resistance level, which really shows up on the monthly chart. Somewhere in the low to mid 50s is what I'd be looking for. Okay, so let's start going through the requests that came through. ETH, so it's sitting right at the 18-month line, which actually doesn't bother me that much. The person who brought this up actually correctly mentioned that the monthly MACD line is turning around and the signal line is sitting right about the zero level. We don't have a lot of selling strength here. But what I would tell you is that this is just giving us sort of a feel for what kind of resistance there is. We know that we really have to get the weekly going before we can do anything. I mean, this needs to come up through 2000. If it does it with a vengeance, right, really strong action, improved volume, strong DI, then you could consider going ahead and taking that as sort of like an ignition move. If not, I would go ahead and let this move up and then look to play the first pullback as these moving averages are turning up. I don't know, because these moving averages are flat, I know, and we have a declining 18-month right now. I don't know that I'm all that excited about this. I know this is a rising, these are modestly rising. So that's why I am willing to look at this at a break above 2000, but I want to see it be pretty definitive. If we're going to do that, I just don't want to get in a situation where I'm buying it and all it's doing is sort of checking out that prior high and then coming back down. So look for ignition in terms of strength, volume, and DI to confirm any kind of move you're going to take here. Okay, I figured someone might ask about this, the Meta, and it just happened to work perfect because the earnings coming. So we have this earnings, we have this big gap up. And the question becomes, is this a period, is this a sell? So we've had a huge move in this stock, massive, massive move. And now we get this huge gap up of 8%. Is this a sell point? Well, I mean, I think you have to decide who you are. If you're a trader, I would always consider taking profits on big gap ups like that, especially because if you look at the way this is playing out, we're kind of coming up against this channel line here. We're not far away from it. Maybe it has a little bit more upside from hitting this pretty strong channel. But if you look at the way these lines, these parallel lines are in place and how strong the ADX is, there's nothing wrong with continuing to let this play out. And what you could do is make sure you get a legitimate pullback. And every time you turn up from that, you use that as a low. So this would have been a stop. This would have been a stop. This could be your stop. So you could keep trailing a stop as long as the momentum remains strong across the board. Now, I know the MACD isn't really confirming here, but I'd be really careful about MACD, especially on this type of time frame. It's a little short term. It's not going to give, it's going to give you little pullbacks. A divergence in MACD is just a pullback. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to roll over. When ADX dies out below 25, now we have something a little bit more significant to worry about. So if you're I like to scale and trail. I don't have any problem with scaling out a little bit and then continuing to trail a stop. If you're a short-term trader and you happen to buy the pullback and you want to just take it on a gap, I like that strategy on a big gap up. But if your mentality is to more see it through, wait for some signs that the momentum is really dying out, especially on this daily chart. Okay, so this next stock request. So we got a pretty violent breakdown here and follow through, right? Downward move. We have confirmation here. I did notice some volume stepping in, right? So we get the violent move to the downside and we get some buyers stepping in. So it might be making a bottom, but it's not what I would consider to be a buyable bottom right now. The only way I would consider doing this is maybe as a short-term trader, if this can break above this horizontal level here and get back up through this level and play it for a trade, maybe up to like 20 or maybe potentially even filling that gap. It is a possibility, but this is just, so I try, when I talk to my subscribers and stuff like this, to me, this is more like shooting a three-pointer from way out, you know, with a 6'10" guy in my face. I mean, I'm trying to find stocks that look like they're layups or, you know, 10-foot jumpers, no one in the way. I'd rather look for those than to try and be a hero and buy something counter trend. There's just too many stocks that are trending and looking attractive. So the first order of business is getting through the 18-week. And if we can break through this sideways channel, then I think we probably are making a little bit more significant low. The volume is telling you there's something going on here. Okay, so DKS. So here's the issue with this. We had a rising 18-week and now it's rolled over. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the stock is rolling down because MACD is sitting right at the zero line and we don't have any selling strength here. But it does mean the likelihood is more sideways unless we can get back up through 140. If we can get a strong move through 140 here, then I think I get a little bit more interested. But it would make sense, just based on the way the monthly has played out, for this to spend a little bit more time working sideways. And then if it can come back up through 140, I think that would be a little bit more attractive. Now, the other way this could play out is work as an opposing trend trigger and take a little bit more time. And then if it comes up from there, you don't have to necessarily buy the breakout if it plays out that way. So, something to watch. It's not a bad stock. It's just, I think it's a little early right now. Okay, so I got someone looking for a new entry in this. There was obviously a really attractive play on the weekly chart with this pullback and strong momentum. Look at all the volume prior to that. And then we had our opposing trend pattern with the kickoff move somewhere between 12, 12 and a half is where the entry would be, at least based on the response I got from my subscribers. So look at the volume pattern. You see how strong this is? So I do think this could be playable on this pullback to the daily, but if we're going to do that, we want to use the hourly to kind of give us that signal. And I would have said that I like this signal here as the 3. Because essentially we have a break of the trend line, a test, and then we come back up and make the 3. But it gapped up in the process of doing that. So I probably want to see this come back up through 19, and I guess I would consider that. But it is possible, based on the way the MACD is playing out, because this is rolled through, that this wants to come back down and check out the 18 one more time. If this comes down a little bit more, we want to double bottom and then coming back up through this prior high here. That would be kind of the kickoff move to get things going again. So I think it's an attractive stock, definitely one to watch. We just have to see how this plays out. I actually, at this point, probably wouldn't mind seeing it come back down, check out 18, and then if it works its way back up through 19, would be of interest. Okay, let's look at something like 3M. And if anyone watched the Final Bar, I got to host the Final Bar on yesterday. And one of the things I spent some time on was talking about ADX, especially exhaustion pattern where ADX is dying out either at a top or a bottom to give you kind of an early signal. But there are times where you get a move to the downside and ADX just continues to confirm. But I think this is actually a reversal developing this time. And why do I think that? Well, I like to count the legs down. So this is one leg, and then we go sideways. It's leg 2, and we go sideways. I kind of think this is all one leg, but let's just say this is, we could do it either way. This could be, let's just call it one leg. So that's leg 1, this is leg 2, and let's say this is leg 3, even though you could divide it up and say it's 4. All right, and then we go again, and it's 5. So either way, at 4 and at 5, I'm starting to think, you know, anytime beyond 3, once we get beyond 3 legs, I'm starting to think reversal. Now, part of the reason why you might not have been thinking reversal here was because of the strength of the down move, and the volume here was actually early in the trend. If the volume was here, then I would have definitely been thinking that's the end of the move. But the volume was actually early in the decline, and by the time we got to the low, it had died out. That's not really what I see in a climax. This is violent selling, normally with continuation. But the next move down, we did get ADX to confirm, but I'm just telling you, there wasn't a significant amount of follow through. If you look at the follow through here, you see all the continuation, this continuation, I mean, it was a little bit, but it really kind of went down and then undercut and failed. So we got a little bit of divergence here in MACD. But I'm just want you to start counting the legs, because once you get beyond 3, it starts to, you should be on the lookout for some kind of a reversal taking place. Okay, let's look at Boeing. This is pretty impressive. So there's a couple things going on here. First off, look at this and look at MACD. It looked like MACD made a slightly lower low, maybe a double bottom, while this was making a higher low. We had low ADX. So through this whole sideways correction period, green stayed above red the whole time. So we know the sellers really just weren't that strong. I had been highlighting this inside this area here. Really, you know, probably started here through this period, I don't know, somewhere in this area. And my reasoning was this 40 moving up underneath and strong move to the upside. Look at how powerful a move we had in ADX. And I'm looking for this to continue to the upside. And now we're getting a little bit more confirmation because we're getting a pretty strong breakout sign in the green DI on the daily chart. So most of these went up and then kind of came back down. This is a pretty strong move. You can see the volume is really strong. DI tends to correlate with volume. So just realize that. Obviously on our earnings, but I could see this carrying higher from here because this is a tight pattern. You see how tight a pattern this is? Really, really tight. Okay, so Microsoft, let's go to the daily on this one. Microsoft was showing strong momentum characteristics. Strong, 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 still well above 25. Then we correct and look at this move to the upside. Just barely goes to a new high. This barely gets above 25. So we should be on the lookout for some kind of a reversal. That's basically what's taking place here. I think we're going to see the 18 cross down below the 40. I think this is going to take a little bit more time. I think we're going to see this a little closer to the 18 week. And then we'll have to see if the weakness on Microsoft spills over onto the weekly chart. Okay, and do we see the ADX roll over, and does this go through a more extensive correction phase? Right now, I'd just be looking for a pullback towards the 18 week, but I do think there's a little bit of short-term risk in this. Okay, let's take a quick look at Zoom. This is actually a pretty good example when we look at what's taken place here. Strong move to the downside, strong move to the downside, still strong. You see this ADX? You see how strong this is? Then look at what happened at the end of this. So we made a new low here with strong ADX. We made a new low here with strong ADX. Now on this low, we don't have the confirmation. So I'm thinking reversal. Now I want to make this crystal clear. I'm thinking reversal. That doesn't mean I'm automatically buying, but I'm looking for something on this chart. We have a low ADX condition. If we come up through 75, I would consider that to be a buyable situation based on the reversal pattern potential that's taking place on the weekly chart. Thanks for watching the show. You can go to rabilstockresearch.com for any of my services. Also, my YouTube channel is called Invest Like a Pro. And if you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.